Right now, you are living through the birth and rapid evolution of a new kind of intelligence, AI.
Rival tech luminaries who have already reshaped our world are in an arms race. And recent polls suggest 70 to 90% of all CEOs plan to invest heavily in AI behind them.
The numbers are staggering, amounting to hundreds of billions of dollars in the next few years. Governments and regulators are stepping in as well, setting the stage for a global paradigm shift.
But have you stopped to understand what AI really is? Are you prepared for a world where AI will impact your job, your health, your relationships, and maybe the nature of your humanity?
I'm Charlie Stack.
I'm Laksh Srinivasan. We believe your success, our success, depends on us starting to have a different set of conversations about AI.
Join us as we get to know our new neighbor. Welcome to the machine. Today, we are going to investigate a less obvious but really important topic, the potential impact of AI on corporate governance, specifically the role of board directors. Boards are a crucial part of the functioning economy. Public and private shareholders delegate proper governance of their investments to boards, typically comprised of deeply skilled, highly experienced, ethically unimpeachable individuals. The job of a board is to be able to quickly synthesize the complexity of a business into key strategic risks and opportunities, and keep the executive team accountable to shareholders. Many boards have added digitally savvy members, but most boards still lack an experienced understanding of AI specifically. Moreover, the ways in which boards synthesize complex operational data to evaluate opportunities and risks hasn't really changed in a while. And yet, AI has unlocked significantly more robust ways of interrogating large, complex data sets. Joining us today is a seasoned board director and friend who was also one of the early pioneers of deploying machine intelligence as an executive, Jim Miller. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you.
Jim owned some of the first machine learning teams at Amazon, and you also ran worldwide operations for Google. Most recently served as the CTO of Wayfair, so you've got quite a bit of experience in this space. You've also served on a number of boards, including currently the RealReal, Brambles, and the AI company LivePerson. Jim, welcome to the machine.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, welcome, Jim.
Thank you.
So diving in, Jim, what are the main jobs of board members when it comes to AI?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I really started and looked at what's the responsibility of board, and I thought it would only be fitting if I took it to ChatGPT, which I did. So from ChatGPT, our responsibility is and I knew this already, obviously, but financial oversight, really appointment and evaluation of leadership, stakeholder communication, succession planning, shareholder relations. But we have areas of responsibility that I think will be profoundly impacted by AI, namely strategic planning, compliance and policy development, and of course, risk management. And we can get into each one of those. But those three areas in particular, I think, are and will be impacted pretty significantly by AI. Yeah, I did some work for the Boston Consulting Group, so I'm going to sound like a consultant here for a second. But, macroscopically, there's ample evidence that companies that proactively invest in technology and innovation, they really widen the gap over their competitors. And these companies are better at delivering new products, entering new markets, and establishing new business models. Laggards are left further and further behind. And I believe profoundly that this will be true of artificial intelligence. And namely, and it goes without saying that, we are in a hype cycle, and it's still very early in the adoption of AI. But I think for those of us that have been around for, decades now in this, on the periphery and in the midst of technology, we can pretty much predict, maybe not perhaps on scale and how large, but there's enough there that AI is going to have a huge impact. So, and Lax, you brought this up, I think, earlier, there's a lot of focus today on artificial intelligence because of the drama at OpenAI and some of the doom and gloom prognostications, of Elon Musk and others. But I think in the long run, artificial intelligence is going to have the most profound impact on the business model of a company and the
Hmm.
innovation that it's ushering in. And I'd say a comparable analogy would be to go back now 30 plus years when internet browsers were around. I
Hmm.
played with the early internet browsers, Mozilla and whatnot. And I think it would be, you kind of knew that this was going to be huge, but I think nobody could have accurately predicted the impact that the internet would have on the
Hmm.
global economy and businesses in general. And you think about, travel and, how it was disintermediated by, sites like TripAdvisor and so on and so forth. So it's easy to look at what's happening in AI and I think get a similar feel that this is going to be huge. But the implication for the board is very clear. We need to evolve and adapt and perform our duties in light of this transformative element and landscape of AI. Now, the good news is that every board member, you don't need to go back and get a degree in computer science to understand the technical nuances and immerse yourself in every aspect of AI. But you should really focus as a board member on thinking about how does generative AI, how's it going to impact the organization, the business model, and the industry segment and vertical that you're operating in. And then, how do you exploit these opportunities? And then you're going to have to manage the challenges and risk of these as well. I think it's all about understanding the potential impact of AI on the business, people, and culture, and compliance and policies.
Yeah, Jim, you mentioned that they don't need to go back and get a degree in computer science. I'm just curious, I can see from your perspective, having been a CTO and being in the field, that it would come naturally to you in terms of both assessing opportunities or asking the questions as well as on the risk side. What do you see in terms of boards that you sit on, in terms of colleagues that may not have this background? How do they best equip themselves for doing their jobs as it relates to AI?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, fortunately, there is a plethora of articles that are coming out on AI, and you can choose whether you want to get and read like TLDR, which comes out daily, which has really a mountain and a stream of information coming around, both technically and non-technically. Companies, my company, the Boston Consulting Group, McKinsey, Harvard Business Review, they're publishing articles. I mean, what I would tell people is, look, find somebody who that's able to bridge the gap between technology and business and
Mm-hmm.
really translate the technical implications. Because, I forwarded, TLDR articles to my board colleagues, and what I hear from a lot of them is, wait, stop. Like, you got to, for lack of a better word, dumb it down even more. I don't
Yeah.
know what hallucination means. I don't know what a transformer looks like. What is
Mm-hmm.
that? So again, I think it's really seeking out the resources. But I would tell a chairman of a board or a lead director, you should bring in an expert,
Mm-hmm.
in digital, and not necessarily on the board, but bring them to the board as a resource
Mm-hmm.
and get everybody to a baseline. Go from there and choose how much technical depth that you want to get into this. But again, I'm fairly technical, and I am simply overwhelmed by the amount of information that's being published on a daily basis around
Yeah.
AI. I don't know how anybody humanly who has a technical background can keep on
Yeah.
top of this stuff. I certainly struggle with it. And then you throw in dramas like OpenAI and what's happening in NVIDIA. And I think, it's fascinating, but at the same time, I can empathize with any board member who's trying to sift through this and just wants to answer the question of, and what does this mean to my company and my board and the future of the business model that we're operating under?
Well, it's sort of, Jim, it's what Lax and I say to everybody, and it underscores that while board members are special in many regards, and they serve a very privileged role in our world and our economy, they're also no different than any of us in that, the future ahead will require probably lots of us, most of us, to rewire to think about continual education in a way that, that we haven't had to, frankly, in the past, even in the internet age, and how to make time for that as a part of their ongoing discipline, because, the goalposts continue to move faster and faster down the field.
That's right, Charlie. And you brought this up earlier, and I'll second this. The very issue that makes us unique and qualified to be on a board is that we have years and years of experience. Many of us as board members are no longer operating executives. So we're not in the deep end of the pool, so to speak, dealing with this on a day-to-day basis. So, and I've spoken to a lot of my fellow board members that they struggle because they've been out of the operating world for years, if not a decade. And you're absolutely correct with the pace of information that is coming at them and the rate of change. I think they have to work doubly hard at staying on top of this because, when I was at Google, I shared an office with the chief operating officer the CTO, and just by osmosis and hearing conversations, you would pick up on all this stuff. I mean, now I find I have to work doubly hard, to your point, to continue to educate and read. But again, a lot of us have intellectual curiosity, and that's certainly an attribute of a board member. So you're kind of pre-wired to do that, but you've got to spend a lot of time. And AI is one of those things. There's a lot of signal to noise to sift through right now, just with the volume of information that's coming out.
And isn't it also true? I don't know, Jim. Maybe you have some examples of fellow board members or things that you have heard. Is, in a way, I sit on a board, and that's in an industry I have no experience in. But what I'm also realizing is it's also about asking some basic fundamental questions. I've recently become a big fan of first principles reasoning, which is just going back to basics.
That's right.
And our research tells us time and time again, people dive head first into whether it's Gen AI or other AI, because to me, board to some extent is you don't need to be a big expert on AI as long as you have the way to think through the why, what, how, why not, so what. So to me, that may also be a very good way, as you said. Would you agree? And have you seen good examples of that?
Yeah, Lox, I think you brought up an excellent point. Getting down to the first principles is extremely important because there's this mystique, which I think is almost a trap or a fallacy about everything that AI can do. When you read about, you really get down to and boil it down to the simple essence of how does a generative AI and a large language model work? It's based on statistics and predictive capability. And, I think what I've heard from other board members that don't have technical backgrounds, that when they really understand from a first principle perspective how LLM works, now they're grossly simplifying it, but they're like, wow, there's no magic around this thing. I mean, it's when you type into Google or OpenAI, it's doing a predictive, model of what's going to come next or how to put that information together. So I think your point around first principles is absolutely correct. So I think board members, and this is tough for some executives. You have to admit that you're relatively ignorant, and that board may have a lot of collective ignorance around the subject, but you've got to express a willingness to ask for help, an eagerness to have curiosity around it, and have an eagerness, to learn about it. And I think that's, for some executives, that can be a tough thing to do because nobody likes to look dumb, in a board meeting. And really, this is about taking something that's got a certain amount of mystique, boiling it down to what it can and cannot do, what are the risks, really getting through the technical jargon, and then understanding the implications of AI. And one thing, Charlie, you were going to say something.
Well, no, Jim, Jim, I was going to say, I think really well said. And one of the things that I think we all agree on is actually that it's probably easier to boil down like what is AI to some understandable pieces that even a non-technical board member or somebody else out there just trying to do their day job can work with. Your point about, what's really happening behind the scenes of a large language model. I was laughing this week, talking to a friend about like these journalists who have tricked, ChatGPT or Bing into, saying that it wants to like, steal your wife or, murder you or something crazy like that. And, how scary that feels because it's happening through human language and it feels sentient, but that the reality behind what's happening there is, you've just tricked a statistical model into overweighting that language to occur next.
Yep.
Like the machine that you're dealing with has no intent other than a probabilistic model behind it.
That's right.
And so it doesn't, in a sense, it doesn't actually even know the meaning of what it's saying. It just knows probabilistically that I should put this word and this word next.
That's right.
It raises an interesting topic, which is how easy it is also to overestimate the risks associated with AI. Like, I think there's a lot of hype in the other direction as well. Are you seeing at the board level, like key areas of misunderstanding that kind of lead to overcautiousness in this case?
It's a great question. Yes and no. I think for the uninitiated and the uneducated board, they're getting their press off the headlines and they're worried about, what are the implications? And I'm thinking about specific boards that I've interacted with or that I'm on. For boards that I would largely say are educated, they know the limitations, and our conversations are more around incorporation of AI into the enterprise risk framework, understanding the implications of AI on data privacy and data governance. So I would tell you that largely as the board members and the boards get educated, they go from this sensationalistic perspective to a pragmatic perspective built around opportunities and risk management. And again, I think that that certainly underscores everything that we've talked about. One thing, your comment earlier sparked a thought. I remember in the early days when we had these elaborate Excel models and we cautioned our employees that, plug and chug, whatever you want to call it, really understand what that black box, the Excel model is. Now it's a little more difficult with LLMs because that logic is obviously at times difficult to trace. But I think, a lot of that analogy still applies where just don't assume that the model is, all knowing and all being and trust it implicitly. You have to build safeguards around that.
And Jim, do you see kind of from a risk perspective, do you see there is Gen AI is, put a more of an emphasis on risk versus opportunity, or how do you see kind of the, I think you used a phrase, or you used a phrase called punctuated equilibriums. Right. And so if this is if you're the punctuated, I don't think we don't know what the equilibrium is going to be like. So so how would you characterize from it as if you were your board member hat, what has Gen AI done to the boards or companies or just when it comes to AI?
Well, I think, and I don't know if this is a product of all of the hype right now in the media around the gloom and doom and some of the drama that's been underscored at OpenAI, but boards are really looking at it more from the standpoint of, risk management and educate me on AI. And I was in a meeting a couple of weeks ago with the leader of a very large private equity firm, and I obviously his name and firm will go unnamed, but he asked me, can you tell me if anybody's actually, doing something with Gen AI at an enterprise? And if they are, what is it? And, that's not to say that I don't think things are happening with Gen AI, but I would say largely where we are right now in the evolution of AI and generative AI, people are still really trying to understand the implications that it will have on their business strategy. So I think naturally in the absence of, you can point to all these different, high value add applications of Gen AI, people are really, in that almost introductory phase. And I think that therefore the landscape is really dominated by understanding it, understanding the risks, and and really managing those. But I think, yeah, I think I brought up that notion of punctuated equilibrium where, the world kind of moves along. And Stephen Jay Gould, the famous evolutionist, I think he was the one that coined that phrase where, you see these things kind of bump along, and then there's a critical mass of elements that come together, and then it creates this new business model or this new change. And I think you're going to see the same thing with generative AI, where there's so much money and there's so much focus going into it right now. We haven't quite landed on the killer app. It's probably customer care and customer service today, but there's a wide spectrum of applications that you can see on the horizon for Gen AI. And these things are always clear in retrospect. How did we not see that happen? Or how could we not have seen all those signs? But that's, usually, how business works. And I think Gen AI is going to be no different.
So what would be, Jim, your advice to a board of any company these days when it comes to Gen AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think largely, one, educate yourself on it. And I think really understand and sift through the technical jargon to understand the translation of AI to your business model, the people and the culture. And we'll talk about that in a second. I think culture is going to be very, very important. And then every aspect of how your company can be enabled to take advantage of generative AI. And I think, one of the challenges that we talk about, and I think it doesn't get enough airplay right now, is just the data. Gen AI models are, the more data you give them, the better the solution. And what I'm finding is a lot of people want to rush into AI and they don't have the data in their organization organized, curated, managed in a way that generative AI models can take advantage of it and use it in the most effective way. In many cases, that's a multi-year journey. I see this a lot where people want to take advantage of AI or start to experiment, and they just don't have the data curated in the right way. There's no single source of truth. So again, I think, and then understand how it plays into your risk management framework. And it's, with risk management, it's always a balanced approach. I mean, particularly with Gen AI, you want to encourage experimentation, but you also want to put safeguards around it. A perfect example is Gen AI is low code or no code. So the very nature of Gen AI is you can spin up solutions very quickly. And I don't know, maybe an example would be, you're a marketing department and you want to go and spool up a personalized marketing campaign using Gen AI, which is pretty easy to pull together, not involve anybody in the IT organization. And that can be both a blessing and a curse. And all of a sudden you're deploying a tool that exposes your customer data externally because you don't have the right data governance process in place. And again, I'm not advocating for overwhelming bureaucracy. Most of the companies I've worked for, I'd say, are largely non-bureaucratic, but you've got to have some standards around that. And I think that you really have to be able to look through your company and their operations, if you're sitting on a board, through a multifaceted approach and really understand how do you prepare your company and its employees for generative AI.
We could go all day here, and I want to be respectful of your time. You did open up the Pandora's box topic of culture. And so I want to hit that one before we let you go. How do you think about culture in the organizations where you're an executive or you're on the board? How do you think about shaping a culture that can successfully navigate this? Because it's more than just strategic decision-making. To your point about the data, it's kind of the entire operating model of a business. And it's the way that all those people get their work done to some extent too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think with any socio-technical system, you have to look at the implications of implementing technology on the culture of the company. It's interesting. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day and about why they didn't want to go into computer science. And I've had this conversation for decades now. And it's interesting because the conversation has changed over the decades. And it used to be, well, it's really hard. And I'm an extrovert and I don't want to sit in a cube all day and code.
That's why I didn't get into it.
Oh, perfect. And then it became, well, I don't want my job outsourced to India or some other low cost area. And now people are saying, oh, these LLMs, they write code almost as well as an intro coder. So why do I want to go into an app, a company that will, or a field that will ultimately be outsourced to a machine? I wouldn't say it's factually correct. I mean, if you're an average programmer, that's probably correct. LLMs will, they will write code. If you are a phenomenal coder, LLMs probably will not be able to innovate and create the way that you do. And I think that goes with any field, whether we're talking about medicine, whether we're talking about, being an insurance adjuster. But let's back it up a second, because LLMs do have and will have, in my opinion, a profound impact on the job landscape over the next few decades. And, one thing that I've learned about technology, and I'm sure all of us have seen this, technology moves much faster than the human workforce is able to adapt to it. And I think that's the genesis of the fears that we're talking about. And I think that generative AI has the potential to even move much, much faster and have this profound impact on the human capital of a corp or of a company. And I think as a board member and as a C-level executive, you have to talk about that, because this will be on everybody's mind. And it's just one more, I mean, I don't know, I've been managing people now for decades, and it's gotten more challenging to manage people from just the complexities of the world and the complexities of society. And I think this will add one more facet of complexity to it. And I think it's something that companies and boards will have to talk about explicitly, because it will have a significant impact on things.
That's a great way to bring this back to humanity, Jim. I think our chairman, Tom Davenport, says when it comes to AI, it's not software or hardware, it's wetware, which
That's
is
right.
humans. Always
Right.
put humanity, in with it. And our podcast, Charlie, Welcome to the Machine. I'm assuming you're welcoming humans to the machine. So I think it's a good reminder when it comes to AI for the board, especially to keep kind of the human capital in mind and how that's going to affect them or turbocharge them.
Yeah, Lax, it's interesting. I remember, and this is somewhat of a similar analogy. This is pre 9/11. I got the opportunity to fly in the cockpit of a Boeing 777 from Bangkok, Thailand to Taipei.
Mm-hmm.
And I was remarking to the pilot and the co-pilot, I've got an aerospace engineering background, so I can understand a little bit of the technology behind it. But the plane literally flew itself from the time
Mm-hmm.
that we took off to the time that we landed until the time we taxied to the runway. And I asked the pilot, I said, I said, wow, like this plane literally flew itself. And I said, do you ever fear you're going to lose your job over, the fact that, and he said, well, let me ask you a question. Would you ever get on an airliner that doesn't have a pilot? And I said, no. And I think AI is a very, very similar. This is a tool. It
Yes.
augments humans. And
Mm-hmm.
I think some of the most incredible opportunities for AI is augmenting humans. I was talking to my neighbor who's a surgeon, and he does robotic surgery. That's all he does. And we were
Mm-hmm.
talking about the implications of AI, and I said, what do you think about AI? And he said, it's an augmentation vehicle that I can't wait to see proliferate more significantly within robotic surgery. And I said, why? And he said, well, as a surgeon, we're still relying on our eyeballs to understand the landscape that we're operating under. And he said, first of all, I'd love to be able to do my operations virtually many times before I ever operate on a patient. Furthermore,
Mm-hmm.
when I'm operating laparoscopically with robotic surgery, I would love to have a second set of eyes that would
Yeah.
actually tell me to look out for and avoid a blood vessel or a nerve or another delicate piece of tissue that I might not see. He goes, but I'm not worried at all that I'm going to be replaced by a robotic surgeon in the
Yeah.
next X number of decades. I'll be long retired if that ever happens. So I think, again,
Yeah.
we should look at it as an augmentation vehicle, not as a replacement vehicle. And that's part of the responsible AI as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Jim, you I think you managed to suggest maybe our next two guests. We need a pilot and a doctor on the show, because I could go in either of those directions for quite a while.
Awesome.
But I know we have to let you go here. I want to thank you for joining us today. As we sign off, give us one thing you're really excited about and one thing that really concerns you about AI.
I think largely, once you get beyond the hype cycle of technology, technology has a long history in totality. And I'm not saying that there aren't detrimental sides of technology, but in totality, technology has always made people's lives better. You think about, go back to the Industrial Revolution, where the majority of Americans and the globe was doing agriculture, with cotton gins and automated the steam engine. Most of us don't even think where we get our food from today. And I think that AI has the potential to make the world a much better place. It may even solve or be a critical element in solving our global climate crisis. The thing that I worry about is in the wrong hands. And, unfortunately, technology is exploited by a minority for, when you think about the sophistication that phishing can now take on, where I can train my voice, or somebody can use my voice off of YouTube to train an LLM to replicate my voice. Think about the sophisticated phishing and identity theft. And I'm sure people are doing this or starting to do this already. So again, I'm an optimist. I've seen technology, improve people's lives over, the short duration of my life. It's going to continue to improve people's lives. So in totality, I'm extremely optimistic about AI, but we have to be realist about it as well.
Well said.
Great thoughts. Thanks so much for joining us today, Jim. Great to see you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Welcome to the Machine.
To join the conversation, visit us on welcometothe-machine-ai.com.
Special thanks to Spencer Stewart, the Return on AI Institute, and our fantastic production team, Trey, Jojo, and John, for helping bring WTTM to life.
Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe.
See you next time.